Well, hearty good day to you. Hopefully, you are enjoying this nice weather, getting down, doing the best we can to be safe and hunkered down. But just reaching out once again in terms of just orienting you to the things of God and just the things that He is that would help us in this time. Now, having finished Philippians 4, 6, and 7, you might wonder where I might turn next. And really had a thought that I would just continue in looking at scriptures that really display God's power, His provisions for our lives, just reminding us of being the overcoming God that He is. I also do want to share. I know that as you're viewing these videos, you might see me have a tendency to look up, and that's because when I'm looking like this, the screen is hazy in my glasses, and so if I'm ever doing this, it's because it's clear. So hopefully that's not too distracting to you, but just to explain why I might sometimes default to that. But I figured where we would turn today, and this might take us a couple of days, not quite enough for one day, not quite, I mean too much for one day, not quite enough for 2 days. But looking at Jesus' calming of the storm, and I really love this story in terms of just how it does display God's power in a very practical way. And so if you're familiar with the story at all, I'm going to be looking at Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. And it says there, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were other boats with him. And so a few points to make, even in terms of these couple of verses. Realize that it is approaching night. It's approaching the time where things would be slowing down anyways. People would be looking to get inside and be napping and sleeping and so on and so forth. Also to recognize, that it has been a busy day for Jesus. I'm not sure that Jesus didn't have many busy. He had many busy days. And so ministering, healing, teaching, being with crowds can be draining in terms of just what Jesus would be going through. And as he's ministering, you can just understand that given an opportunity of pause, opportunity of silence, it would be pretty easy for him to fall asleep, as we see if you're familiar with the passage. You know that that's what happens. And so they took him along with them, and it's very important to recognize that Jesus says here, let's go over to the other side. And what I see in this statement is really Jesus declaring the ultimate goal, declaring the purpose, declaring the end game, if you will, in terms of going from where they were to where they were going. There's an assurance in terms of what God said. And when we look at what goes on in the middle between where they were and where Jesus said they were going, we know there's going to be disruption. We know there's going to be chaos. There's going to be problems, going to be issues. And, to me, that's all representative of life, of kind of how things are. But to know that undergirding all of that is the promise of God. It's the word of God. It's the direction of God. It's God saying that I've got your starting point secure and I've got your end point secure. And so therefore, whatever happens in the middle, you can't take your eyes off of that. You always have to remember that I have a declared purpose. I have a declared will. I have a declared provision. Even when we think about issues of life and death that we're confronting around the world, or even for ourselves, to know that we have the promise of heaven, that what Paul says is to live is Christ and to die is gain. Now, that doesn't mean we seek it. It doesn't mean we're irresponsible with the lives that we have. But if we were looking for an ultimate end game, an ultimate assurance of, hey, I've got this secured, that is true. That regardless of what happens in the middle, that we know when we have that promise. And I think God, because He would want us to be confident of where we would be spending forever, He would want us to have that assurance so that things of life wouldn't be as important. They wouldn't be as disruptive. But I believe that that's not the only thing that God would declare, or the only thing that He would will, in terms of how He communicates what's on the other side, or where are we going in life. And so, but just this statement that certainly in this context, I think it would want Jesus would want his disciples to be secured in the fact that, hey, let's go to the other side. So that's what's going to happen. In terms of God's promises, in terms of his word, all the things that he would say, those are the things that are like, hey, let's go to the other side. I will take care of you. I'm in control. I've got a way. I've got a purpose. All those things that we need to transcend our circumstances with. And now as we go on in the passage, we see in verse 37 that there's a furious squall that comes up. It says, a furious squall came up and waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. And if you've ever heard a message from this passage, you do understand that these furious squalls, these things that come suddenly on the Sea of Galilee, was very common to that location. The Sea of Galilee was almost in the bottom of a bowl with mountains that surrounded it, hills and mountains that surrounded it. And so therefore, for things to come in suddenly and surprisingly, like it's not like, okay, we saw the storm off in the distance, so let's not go on the lake because it might be dangerous. No, it were things that came up suddenly. So this was a sudden squall that came up. That they couldn't have foreseen, but it's here, and now they have to deal with it. And to me, that is life. That is the nature of how things are in what we orchestrate, in what the world is. That we never know when we're going to be thrown a curveball. We never know when problems are going to come up. As we've been in the context of this coronavirus, like, do you remember what it was like 2 months ago, where you could do whatever you wanted, where you could hug people and shake hands and be in church and do all the things, and all the we get in this setting and we kind of like we're overcome by the circumstance we're in, but we know that's what it was. We know that's where we're going to at some point in time. But we're just in this time frame where we're dealing with the storm. Here's the squall. Here's the thing that surprised us. We could never have planned for this. We could never have made arrangements for this. To the extent that we do that. But let's keep that to a side as thoughts run into my head. But that sometimes is the nature of life, and to know that ultimately God's going to have an answer. Jesus is going to do something, like the story. None of this is a surprise to you. Hopefully, if it is, then you got to tune in next time and get the end of the story. But what I find compelling here, as the squall is there, as the problem exists, as the thing that's surprising comes on them, what is Jesus doing? Again, they're nearly swamped. These fishermen, these guys that are used to the Sea of Galilee, it's even threatening them. It's even scaring them. And coronavirus, even scaring people that might be the most confident, the most assured, or the most protected. They're nervous in terms of this. And what is Jesus doing? In verse 38, Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. Let's just stop there in terms of talking about the disciples. Well, actually, no, we'll get to that the next time. to just understand that all this is happening, all the fury of life, all the things the disciples are doing to try and control things and hunker down and do the things that they knew they could do to be safe. What is Jesus doing? He's sleeping. He's not scurrying. He's not afraid. He's not worried about what's going to happen or what the provision's going to be or how this is going to turn out. He's at rest. And what a great picture for us. I think it does point to, the book of Hebrews actually talks about a Sabbath rest, and I think it is in chapter 4 there, a Sabbath rest that we have as believers, that we may not obey the Sabbath in the same way the Jewish people did. But there's still a Sabbath rest that should be in our hearts that's still about the promise of God. It's still about the provision of God. It's still about God saying, hey, you don't work because I'm working. And so this picture of Jesus being asleep is really I think the statement of the calm that God has in the midst of the storms that we're going through. Now, it is tempting. Well, the disciples are going to attribute that to Jesus not caring. And let me just say that as I close, that's not what that sleeping is about. When we see God inactive, when we see God not doing the things we would expect him to do, that we would want him to do, we can know that God is always operating according to what is best, what is the truest, what accomplishes his plan, what's consistent with his character, what is consistent with our growth and our maturity for us being built in faith. And so to recognize that same peace, that same calm that Jesus has, he would really wish for us. Even in the midst of our activity, even in the midst of doing things to keep us safe, regardless of what the storm is, that there's still a rest that we have, that God is still on the throne, God is still in control, God is still, he is not freaked out, he is not scared, he is not concerned about the who's and the what's and the wherefores and so on and so forth. We do what we can. I don't think it was wrong for the disciples to be doing all their fisherman knowledge to try and take care of the boat, but they didn't have faith, they didn't have rest, they didn't recognize that Jesus has got this, and it rather than his sleep saying that he doesn't have it, it's actually the greatest expression that he does have it. But we'll get to the rest of this next time. God bless and have a great weekend. Tune in on Sunday. We'll be doing the online video, the Facebook Live, Living Hope Christian Church Facebook page. Just a great opportunity for us to reconnect together in terms of enjoying worship together as well as the Word. All right. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.